I'll introduce today's witnesses. We first have the Honorable Eric Schmitt. Senator Schmitt represents the great state of Missouri in the United States Senate. Before his election to the Senate in 2022, Senator Schmitt served as the Missouri Attorney General and the Treasurer of that state. The Honorable Jeff Landry, former colleague of ours. Jeff Landry serves as the Attorney General of Louisiana, a post he has held since 2016. Prior to serving as the Attorney General, he represented Louisiana's 3rd Congressional District here in the United States House of Representatives. Mr. John Sauer is a Special Assistant Attorney General for the Louisiana Department of Justice. He previously served as Deputy Attorney General for Special Litigation with the Missouri Attorney General's Office and Solicitor General of Missouri. He clerked for Judge Michael Ludick and Justice Antonin Scalia. And then Matthew Seligman. Matthew Seligman is a non-resident fellow at the Constitutional Law Center at Stanford Law School. His research focuses on election law, constitutional law, federal courts, contracts, and private law theory. He clerked for Judge Douglas Ginsburg. We welcome our witnesses today and thank them for appearing. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show that each of the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Please note that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes. We'll give a few more minutes, of course, to Senator Schmitt, and Attorney General Landry has been the courtesy, or has been the custom of this this committee. And we'll start with Senator Schmitt. You know how it works here with the lights. Senator, you go, but like I said, we'll give you a little extra time there. We appreciate your service to our country and your state, and appreciate you being here today. And you're now recognized, Senator Schmitt.
Thank you. Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, and members of the Select Subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss this important issue. The First Amendment is the beating heart of our Constitution. The First Amendment is integral to maintaining our Republican form of government and the belief that we are a country of free people, not oppressive government. The Biden administration has led the largest speech censorship operation in recent American history. Since taking office, President Biden and his team have labored to suppress viewpoints with which they disagree. And in doing so, they have infringed upon the individual freedoms of millions of Americans. And no matter what your political affiliation is, government censorship should concern everyone. The Biden administration has coerced, cajoled, and colluded with social media companies to censor disfavored speech. The Biden team has publicly threatened social media companies from removing legal protections, with removing legal protections, blamed social media companies for societal problems, accused social media companies of killing people, and these social media companies, some of the biggest companies in the history of the world, willingly took part in this Orwellian, vast censorship enterprise. On multiple occasions, President Biden and his team have threatened to punish social media companies that did not sufficiently censor Biden's political opposition by revoking Section 230. Biden suggested Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg should be subject to civil liability and potential criminal prosecution for not censoring political speech. President Biden also repeatedly accused social media companies of, quote, killing people by not censoring enough disfavored speech. The Biden administration has threatened and attacked social media companies so that those social media companies would censor speech the Biden administration dislikes. Until the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit and later the Twitter files, the Biden administration's efforts to pressure and collude with social media companies was behind the scenes through meetings and emails and was unknown. On behalf of Missouri and Louisiana, I was proud to join with General Landry to sue the Biden administration for violating the First Amendment through this vast censorship enterprise. This lawsuit alleges the Biden administration, including President Biden himself and members of his team, pressured and colluded with social media giants to censor free speech in the name of combating so-called disinformation and misinformation, which led to the suppression and censorship of truthful information on a scale never seen before. The lawsuit provides example after example of truthful information that was censored by social media companies that were admitted at a later date to be truthful or credible, including the Hunter Biden laptop story, the COVID-19 lab leak theory, and the efficacy of masks. Discovery obtained by Missouri and Louisiana demonstrated the Biden administration's coordination with social media companies and collusion with nonprofits to censor speech was far more pervasive and destructive than ever known. Documents reveal multiple White House officials, from the former press secretary to the digital director, relentlessly pressuring social media companies to remove specific posts or accounts or expand censorship practices. The White House wanted posts censored from Fox News host Tucker Carlson, even though Facebook found that the content did not violate its policies. The White House also asked for unfavorable news to be put, quote, in context with specific talking points, along with amplification of Biden administration messaging and FAQs. Missouri and Louisiana also deposed Dr. Anthony Fauci. This deposition showed that when Dr. Fauci spoke, big tech censored. For example, Dr. Fauci was aware early in the pandemic that his agency had funded dangerous gain-of-function research on the coronavirus at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but he sought to discredit and suppress the theory that COVID-19 leaked from a lab to deflect blame and avoid potential responsibility for the pandemic. In his deposition, Dr. Fauci claimed 174 times that he could not recall, including about critical details related to gain-of-function research and other issues associated with the lab leak theory in the government's response to the pandemic. Because of Dr. Fauci's influence, social media platforms censored the lab leak theory and other COVID-19 viewpoints that Dr. Fauci and his cabal of experts disfavored. Missouri and Louisiana also deposed the FBI agent about the Hunter Biden laptop story. This deposition and relevant documents revealed that the FBI deliberately planted false information about hack and leak operations in advance of the Hunter Biden laptop story coming out in order to deceive social media platforms into censoring the Hunter Biden laptop story. The FBI also flagged social media accounts for censorship on a monthly basis and have an estimated 50% success rate in getting reported disinformation removed or censored. The Missouri versus Biden lawsuit also obtained documents revealing that multiple federal agencies have pressured and colluded with big tech or social media companies to flag and censor large number of accounts and posts, especially related to public health and elections. The federal government has even created public-private partnerships to expand its censorship reach. Without the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit and the subsequent disclosures in the Twitter files, Americans would have never known about the Biden administration's coordination, collusion, and coercion to censor speech. President Biden and his administration may lust for its own ministry of truth, but I, along with millions of Americans, will never stop fighting for the God-given right to speak your mind, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Americans have enshrined the First Amendment in our Constitution more than 230 years ago, for good reason and for times such as these. We cannot allow the Biden administration to infringe upon the freedoms that we cherish and that have been purchased by the sacrifice of millions of Americans. Freedom of speech is vital to our country and our people. In many ways, it's our pressure release valve. We must stop the Biden administration's threat to free speech so that America can remain the freest country in the history of the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. Mr. Attorney General, you're recognized for your 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plassick, and the distinguished members of this select subcommittee. Mr. Chairman, I would ask if I could correct the record quickly. Ms. Plassick fails to recognize that I submitted a letter on my own condemning all violence, all political violence, and urged my colleagues to do the same. Since I would remind everyone that violence throughout that past year had inflicted a lot of damage on other federal buildings as well. And so I would like to submit that letter for the record.
That's not a correction.
Gentlelady's
out of order.
That's not a correction.
Time belongs.
I said he refused to join the 50 other attorneys.
General lady has not been recognized. Time belongs to the Attorney General from the state of Louisiana. Mr. Landry, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful for the opportunity to join Congress today, along with my former colleague and now U.S. Senator Schmidt from Missouri and Mr. Sawyer to discuss the findings of our federal government censorship case, Louisiana and Missouri versus Biden. Since I was sworn in as the Attorney General in 2016, I have been ringing alarm bells about big tech. In fact, in 2018, I led a bipartisan discussion of attorney generals about the dangers that I saw regarding big tech. It was a bipartisan, multi-state coalition. Back then, the big story was the election of President Trump, and some were quick to blame social media platforms, especially Facebook, for enabling fake news to spread. Then, social media was actively used to tip the scales in President Biden's favor in 2020 by censoring real news, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story, among others. Despite all of this, federal agencies have been allowed to co-opt these private companies and use social media platforms to infringe upon the First Amendment rights of Americans. Let's look at the COVID-19 pandemic. During that time, Facebook had close to 3 billion users worldwide, with roughly 124 million in the U.S. alone. In 2021, 66% of U.S. adults used Facebook, while 23% used Instagram. Over 500 million tweets were posted daily during the pandemic by more than 340 million users on Twitter. On YouTube, roughly 500 hours of video content were uploaded every minute, with more than 4 billion hours of video viewed each month. More than 72% of U.S. adults used the platform. Why is this important? Because our lawsuit has uncovered a censorship enterprise that spans numerous government institutions and all major social media platforms. And that censorship enterprise has been widely successful in achieving its goals. White House Director of Digital Strategy, Robert Flattery, was impressed when YouTube reported their success in reducing watch time of borderline content by 70%. This is what we found in our case. The FBI claims a success rate of 50% in getting platforms to censor content flagged as misinformation. The Election Integrity Partnership, now known as the Virality Project, bragged that 4 major platforms they worked with all had high response rates and that 35% of URLs shared with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube were either labeled, removed, or soft blocked. As a result of this collusion between social media companies and the CDC, NIH, NIAID, American citizens, scientists, and journalists were shadow banned, censored, silenced, and deplatformed for their valid concern about lockdowns, masks, COVID vaccines, and more. Robert Kennedy Jr., the nephew of a president, the son of the former U.S. Attorney General of this country, the nephew of a distinguished U.S. Senator who, by the way, was a Democrat, was censored. Tucker Carlson, who hosted the top-rated primetime television news, was also censored. as so were millions of Americans, while deceitful and manipulative voices like Dr. Anthony Fauci were elevated. This censorship enterprise knows no bounds, and it's not limited in scope to COVID-19 or elections. Yet many of the committee members will sit here today and say, what can we do? I say, bring the federal government to heel. No one in this chamber on both sides of the aisle should be opposed to that. And I applaud this body's efforts and the chairman for passing the Protecting Speech and Government Interference Act. However, I would offer that it just doesn't go far enough. And I would ask those on the left to join in making it tougher. The time has come when we must hold federal employees and contractors and federal actors accountable by terminating both their jobs and their retirement for violating the First Amendment of American citizens. If they participate in violating American citizens' First Amendment rights, and that's what a court finds, then those are the penalties that should be imposed. This chamber should also draft legislation that will open the pathway for legal liability for such conduct, so that American citizens have a right of action against their own government in protecting their, and I repeat, their First Amendment rights. There must be a penalty, or this problem will never be solved. And if you would like to understand exactly how bad this problem has become, I invite you to read our satirical pamphlet, The Censorship Enterprise. The Future is Now, which is basically the federal government's guide to limiting disfavored speech. If you're not disturbed by that document, you're either complicit or contributing to the problem. But know that the state of Louisiana and Missouri are fighting back against this vast government censorship in our federal courts today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney General Landry. We appreciate you coming here and testifying today, as well as Senator Schmidt. And we'll let you move on to your other responsibilities, and we'll get to our next witnesses. But thank you both for your leadership.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is recognized for a point of order. If he'll state his point of order.
Mr. Chairman, these witnesses are being dismissed without the ability to cross-examine their statements. They've made some outlandish allegations here, and consistent with the work of this committee, especially this Select Committee, and congressional hearings in general, we should have the ability to question their statements.
Yeah, it's a long-standing practice of the committee to, when you have our colleagues from the other side of the aisle and other officials, to let them testify.
No. These witnesses, Mr. Chairman, these witnesses were direct witnesses as to the cases that they brought. When we bring in our colleagues from the Senate and other colleagues from the House, we extend them a courtesy. Many times we do not even swear them. We do not require them to take an oath. We allow their testimony in a ceremonial or in a non-substantive way. But these two witnesses have just presented evidence that I think in part is false. And I would like the opportunity to cross-examine those witnesses. And if this...
Those witnesses aren't here.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
You will get a chance to cross-examine Mr. Sauer. You've not stated a point of order here. That I'll recognize the gentleman from Louisiana.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. Isn't it true that even in recent days...
Reclaiming my time.
No, you're not recognized, sir. Isn't it true that even...
Yes, I am. I was recognized, sir. He did recognize me.
Well, point of order. I'm now recognizing Mr. Johnson because you're not stating your point of order any longer. You're making a speech.
And my point of order, Mr. Chairman, is to recall, isn't it true that in recent days, even colleagues like Congressman Jamie Raskin presented testimony that was pretty salacious and was allowed to leave the room, and we were not allowed to cross-examine him. Isn't that true?
Mr. Chairman, in response to the gentleman's...
The committee will abide by the custom of the House.
Salacious has to do with sexual content, and I don't think that our colleague, Mr. Raskin, presented salacious comment, I would ask that
Well,
that
let's call it
characterization
outrageous
be
then. I'll
taken
use the same
down.
term that my colleague did.
That word be taken down because it's false
I think
and
you
it's
just said outrageous.
Mr. Chairman,
inflammatory.
in debate on the point
Gentleman
of
from
order.
Louisiana.
No, Mr. Chairman, in
Committee will be
debate.
in order.
on
The
the
gentleman from
point of
Louisiana
order.
said it was not salacious, it was outrageous. He changed the term. We will now
Mr.
get to
Chairman,
other
in de-
witnesses.
No,
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, in debate on the point of order, please, that
Chairman.
was just raised.
Gentlelady
Chairman,
from Florida is recognized.
Thank you very much. And the Attorney General is not from, Mr. Landry is not a member of Congress, is not entitled to an extension of courtesy that we give to some of our colleagues or even former colleagues. He is the Attorney General
We extended
of
the
a state.
same. I would just say to the gentlelady from
He
Florida,
was a
we
mem-
extended the same courtesy to Attorney General Landry, former member of the
Mr.
United States
Raskin
Congress,
was a
that we
member-
extended to Tulsi Gabbard, former member of the United States Congress.
That
We're
was a
being
member
consistent.
panel. Mr.
The chair
Chairman,
now recognizes
that was a
Mr.
member panel. This
Sauer
is not a
for
member
his
panel.
5 minutes of testimony.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Sauer, you are
on the point of
recognized.
order, on the point of order, at least, if we're not going to have the ability to cross-examine, I would move that we move to strike the testimony provided by Senator Schmidt and Attorney General Landry. If we're not going to observe...
You mean you want to censor it? Is that, you want to censor their
I want to
testimony?
strike it. I want to strike it. I want to strike it. If we aren't able to probe the veracity of their statements, the truthfulness of their statements,
You will be given your 5 minutes here when we get to the 5
they're
minutes.
not
of questions.
here.
They're not here to
They're
question.
absent.
Understand
They
that.
cannot
You will be able to
they
ask-
have scurried
you can-
away
you
with
can-
your complicity.
They
They refuse
have
to
not
defend.
scurried away. They
in
were
a country
dismissed
of
like all witnesses were
330
dismissed.
million
The chair
people,
recognizes
you
Mr.
couldn't find
Sauer
two people
for his
to
5
defend
minutes
their
of
statements.
testimony.
That's pretty disgraceful.
Mr. Sauer, you
Allowing them to
recognized.
leave is not weaponization. I don't know what is,
Oh,
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, right.
Thank you all
It will
for
be in order,
illustrating
Mr.
our
Sauer, you
point. Thank you.
recognize. Gentlemen may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Plaskett.
Mr.
members of
Chairman,
the
I move to
subcommittee.
adjourn. I move to adjourn.
The gentleman's
this
not
is a
recognized.
mockery. This is a mockery and a disgrace, and it's shameful
Gentleman's not
that
been
you participate in
recognized.
this.
The gentleman, Mr. Sauer, is recognized for his 5 minutes of testimony.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn.
Motion to
And it is
adjourn.
not debatable.
It's not
Mr. If
debatable.
you don't know the rules of the committee, then talk to your parliamentarian.
Well, you weren't recognized for your motion.
Nor are you
Mr.
following the rules of the
Sauer is
committee. You can't
recognized
speak
for
out of
his
order.
5 minutes.
What are you doing? What are you doing? You're out of order.
Mr. Sauer, you
Listen
can
to your own
proceed.
words.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member